Hello and welcome to part 2. We have a lot to get through here, so we're jumping straight into where we left off. In the little tutorial sequence, it has you bring up your camera to record the helicopter burning, and then watch the recording. So not only do you, narratively, stop at the wreckage to record it, instead of scramble to see if your wife is burning up in it, but you watch the recording right after it if you follow the game's instructions. Also, when you watch the recording, he says she wasn't in there, but when you walk up, he freaks out and then discovers that she isn't in there. Can you please pick when Blake discovers that she isn't in there? Maybe? We're not told anything about what happened in that church. Alright, let's talk about Lynn during all this stuff. It's perfectly okay for the story to have Lynn not want to talk about what happened in the church. That's fine. As Lynn and Blake are walking away from the church, from the scene, when it happens, right after it happens, that creates an element of mystery, which, as I stated in my How to Write Scary Stories video, is an element that should be present in a horror story. That's all fine. That's fine. The issue with this game is it takes this mystery and never gives you an answer. The crucial balancing act of the mystery aspect of story writing, right, particularly in horror, is to give the audience some form of closure to the mystery that you have present. Are there exceptions to the rule? Sure. But Outlast 2 is not one of them. And by having this question go unanswered, in this circumstance, you have an unfulfilling story. And we can speculate all day, but if we're not given an answer, then at the end of the day, whatever we come up with is writing the story for the developers, which just no. This definitely follows the theme of lazy writing, which is pretty much par for the course for the Outlast series.
You didn't see her, but she definitely did see you. The music gets loud and she runs out of the fog straight towards you. When I was playing this for the first time, I froze completely. I had no idea of what was coming towards me. Or maybe I just wanted to get a closer look at that pretty face. She gets close to me, whacks me, and kills me almost instantly. This scene to me was really scary. I was already anxious with the way the scene was prepped, with its incredibly low light and mumbling noises that when she attacked me, I couldn't even do anything. Of course, after I died, I had to do it again. This time I tried being smarter by hiding behind walls. And then something weird happened. To my surprise, this woman had X-ray vision and could see behind walls. What kind of wall hacks are these? Anyways, you lose her by going to a place she can't go.
This scene here with Marta represents one of the major issues with Outlast as a series. You'll see that she spawns here and slowly chases you. Why? At this point in the game, we have no idea. There's no context for her being here to chase you. At this point, Father Noth has not said that you need to be killed. So why is Marta here chasing you? And I have an answer. She's here for a specific reason. This has nothing to do with the story. This is mechanics. She is here to prompt the player to run away. If you turn around and start sprinting, but then turn around again, she'll be gone, disappeared. If you don't run, she'll boop you to try and prompt you to run. And when testing this, I actually got her to disappear in the middle of one of her lines. Once you realize all of this, instead of being tense and scary, this becomes embarrassing. Literally, I can just lead her around the entire area. She poses no threat to me because I can just make her disappear whenever I want to. Also, you see that I just stood still and she calmly walked up to me and baffed me. I am really confused about what happened to Lixie in there because that did not happen to me at all. This is a point of frustration I have. In this area here, I'm pressing forward the entire time. The game is attempting to simulate disorientation and walking after you've just fallen off of a cliff. But the way this is executed is just infuriating. This violates my perception of how I think I should be walking after I've just fallen from a cliff. And instead of feeling immersed, I'm yelling at Blake to just walk the fuck forward. This is a disconnection from the story. And you can see in the shadow here, they just have Blake randomly walking sideways at different cent intervals of time. This game suffers from a severe lack of direction and telling players where to go. This can lead to frustration due to multiple reasons. Either you don't know where you're intended to go and the enemy backs you into a corner and kills you, or something like this happens. For reference, this was during my second playthrough, and I forgot where I was supposed to go after I placed the transparency on the projector. It never occurred to me to go through this particular door that doesn't have door handles. Alright. What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to go to this door and turn around? No. Give me something that I'm supposed to do, game. What is it? This is another example of what I'm eventually going to be talking about if I haven't talked about it already. It's this frustration that the player ends up getting when they are stuck, and it's very clear that they don't know what they're supposed to do. Like here, I don't remember what I'm supposed to do here. All I know is that something is supposed to happen, and I've triggered something. I've triggered this guy to astral project at me. But I don't know what that other something is supposed to be. Is this door unlocked? No. Is he gonna come after me if I'm in here? See, now this is me testing mechanics. Now I'm testing how the system works. I don't see the system, or I don't see the story layer anymore. I see the system. So now I'm just trying to figure out how it works, because I don't see the story anymore. I can't go through here. God damn it!
You need to keep the player from understanding its systems in a horror game. That will spell the death of your game and its presence. The moment that someone can figure out where the strings are and how to manipulate them, it's over. Obviously this applies to every single game, but when the focus is so hard on the payoff in a game, there isn't going to be much to talk about in terms of building up the game, is there?
This leads into talking about objectives in this game. When you start the game, you are told that objectives are always found by pressing tab. This means that the game will not outright tell you when your objective changes. It is on you to check the camera for what you have to do. However, during the school segments, you only have one listed objective: find a way out. Horror elements. The game's horror seems to rely heavily on jump scares, chase sequences, we'll talk about those, gratuitous gore, and grotesque imagery. As my friend Zach had stated during our look at the House on the Hill, now called Mists of Aden, jump scares are not hard to do. And the grotesque? Well, throw enough disturbing imagery and themes and apparently there you go. But I found subtlety in this area and building up to a payoff to be far more impactful. I would say like in Silence of the Lambs when Lecter escapes. And no, I'm still not going to talk about the ritual in the mines. Stop asking. The only thing I'll say about that whole mess is... why? Because they're insane. Yeah. I guess that's the excuse for everything now, isn't it? These are ultimately lazy attempts to make a horror game. Do they work on the general audience? Yeah. They do. That doesn't make it any less lazy. You don't need this. The fear of the unknown is a very strong element to work with that will always be at your disposal at the start of a game. This game does not look terrible. It has visual quality of a horror environment down. You literally have all of the tools necessary to craft an unsettling environment where the fear of the unknown will resonate. But no. Jump scares, gore, running away. It's quicker. It's easier. It's less work. And it shows. Pacifism and helplessness. I know the whole thing about Outlast is that you can't fight back. I find this within this particular game, Outlast 2, to be extremely annoying. At this moment, you see your wife getting choked out and captured. You continuously hear Blake say, very aggressively, to get off him, let him go. Yet, to cut corners, his hands are only animated to be held out in front of him. Now, to this premise, I have trouble taking this idea seriously. I don't care how much of a pacifist you are. I guarantee you, if you see your wife, significant other, a member of your family, getting assaulted, getting knocked out, you're throwing some hands, or at least doing your damnedest to get free, to do something. For this reason, I hate the helpless mechanic of this game. It is far more understandable for Outlast 1, as I can really understand an investigative reporter having a bit of a tough time fighting Chris Walker or Traeger. Notes. In the first game, there was a heavy reliance on the written notes to get Miles' thoughts and feelings on the situation across to the player, as the character is primarily silent. In Outlast 2, the developers seem to have listened to some amount of criticism, because the notes mechanic has been replaced with recording events and having your fully voiced character Blake Langerman speak what he thought. And then written notes that you find are written by other people, and the camera captures it, and you can read it. Good stuff. Now, I don't typically have an issue with player-controlled characters having dialogue in-game, particularly in a story-driven experience, my main example here being Soma. However, in Outlast 2, I often found myself wishing he was not given a voice at all to allow me, the player, to experience the situation and react to what the character was seeing myself. Added to that fact, there were a number of recorded scenarios where I know without a shadow of a doubt that what Blake says while viewing these recordings is nowhere near what my reaction would have been. For example, you will find a woman chained to a bed, and that is where I will stop my description of that scene for general decency. After you record your video and view it, he says,
I guess this is where the magic happens.
I cannot for the life of me think of any human being that I know on this earth who would look at this scene and think anything other than disgust at the scene and pity for the woman. This is definitely not a situation where the comment, "This is where the magic happens," is appropriate, or even how I would expect a normal human would think while looking at this. This is one of the many vital points where my immersion broke, as these are not things that I would be saying in these situations, which, as I understand for horror games to be largely effective, is not a good thing to have happen. In terms of note-taking and finding out how Miles or Blake are reacting to the situation, perhaps there's no winning, because both of the solutions, the notes and the voice-acted recordings, are left with issues. What would be a suggested solution then? Perhaps the best solution for this is to simply not have this mechanic at all. and find a different way to convey the character's view of the situation, if at all. The school. Alright, I'm excited to talk about this one. They put an explanation of this in the Trees of Metal note, where a man approached the radio tower and woke up somewhere else, to keep from explaining how Blake gets from point A to point B. No. Explain how there are heretics in the water here, and now I'm on the ladder. Because the heretics aren't here. If we're running with the idea that the radio towers are activating, and that causes the lights, and that causes the walking dreams, then explain what's happening here. Because we've seen that the light will affect the outside world, the birds, the cultists, but this didn't happen here. So as far as I know, this time, it's only happening to me. I am the only one being affected by the walking nightmares. And the heretics, they aren't affected at all, because there's no white light. And the only time I've seen them be affected was when there is the light. Which brings me back to the question of why are they not still pursuing me when I'm back and on the ladder? And I'm not going to just write off the school parts of the story as psychological horror, Lixian. This part of the game feels so out of place in conjunction to the rest of the game and taking the story into context. I don't feel that it has a place here. And it certainly doesn't help the game make any sense. In fact, it makes it even more confusing. Like, I understand, due to Blake's childhood trauma, the source of that trauma, Mr. Loudermilch, will manifest as something scary to Blake within nightmares. Sure. But, well, look at this right here. What are these veins / tendrils corrupting the walls and the floor? And what are these growths here? What do these signify? I don't know. As visually stunning as this is, why? Why does Blake see the room like this whenever he sees the nightmare teacher?
And I might be wrong, but as a creator, I think constraining yourself to real-life situations only makes creativity incredibly limited, especially in a horror situation. When you add psychological events to the mix, you can make everything. Creativity can flow freely. I mean, there are some constraints, of course, because you want things to have some sort of meaning, but still, it's so freeing.
What do you think makes science fiction such a ripe theme for a horror game?
Well, with science fiction, you know, the sky's the limit. You can push it all the way as far as your imagination will take you, but there's a certain realism that you need to stick to in order to make it all believable, you know? So, yeah, you got to strike that balance.
Now I'll quantify this a bit further in a different direction. I need to ask a question. Knowing the story of the main plot and knowing the story of the school sequences, what does the school stuff do for the game? What does it help us learn or achieve outside of its own story? Well, Bowiehunter, it helps us see that Blake is slowly losing his grip on reality and becoming more and more susceptible to the morphogenic engine experiments. Okay, sure, but you can do that without a completely separate story, so what else does it do that would warrant its place in the game with this story? The way I see it, nothing. It doesn't help us find out why the cultists are insane. It doesn't help us understand how Murkoff is involved. It doesn't even help us understand that Murkoff is involved at all. Why is this here? What I think happened is Red Barrels had too many things that they wanted to do, and it left them with two stories that they wanted to tell. But they couldn't think of a better way to incorporate them for them to make sense together. It's like when you're doing a jigsaw puzzle. and there's that one piece that clearly doesn't fit in the space, but you keep picking it up and trying it over and over and over. Like, no, it'll definitely work this time. I promise it'll work. I just have to get it in the right... Not only that, but even if I did agree with it serving a purpose to the story of the game, I absolutely cannot side with Blake's decision here when we're finally shown what happened to Jessica. It is extremely clear that Jessica does not want to be alone with this dude. Even as a kid, I would not have left. I cannot agree with this segment. And it was so jarring to me that Blake pieced out that I'm taken out of the story. How? Because now I'm annoyed at Blake for making this decision. Like, Blake, fight back. This screams wrong, and there's no way that you don't know that. However, there's one part of a school segment that I really like. You are in a completely dark room, and you need to follow Jessica's voice using the microphone to make it out safely. This is interesting. This is also the only area where the microphone is actually extremely useful. And after this segment is done, you can go back to forgetting that it's even a thing. This segment uses a jump scare to get you, but for this one, I'm actually okay with it. Why? Because it works for the setting. They make you listen. They cut off your sight, so you're forced to focus on sound and really focus on it to make sure you're going the right way. And then they cut the sound. They build. They make you wonder why you can't hear her anymore. Well, that's because she's dead. A great example of this type of thing is In Silence. It's the idea of sensory deprivation in horror games, and it works really, really well.
The thing is that we try and keep everything in the player's mind, show as little as possible, and also let the player do as little as possible. Because if you're like shooting stuff all the time, that's your main activity. You're not gonna focus on some weird sound. And so if your entire focus is just focusing on weird sounds, you get a different kind of experience. You're really like minimizing the impressions that the player has. Sensory deprivation almost, with just the small sounds and ambient tunes and stuff like that.
Now, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about the relationship between Lynn, Blake, and Jessica. The way I see it, Lynn is our wife. She should absolutely be our focus throughout this entire game. But more than likely, we're also going to be concerned with finding out what happened to Jessica. And when we do, if there's something we can do to potentially stop it. Who knows? Maybe we actually have a choice in a Red Barrels game. But I find what they do here strange. We begin the game, and Blake is dreaming about Jessica's death. As we progress, he sees Jessica hanging everywhere and thinks of her instead of Lynn. Sure, the event that he witnessed, the death of a very close friend, and being made to keep quiet about it, could be enough to cause guilt-ridden trauma for the rest of your life. Sure, I'm not denying that. But I think this line here is what did it for me.
I can still say Jess. Lynn. Her name is Lynn.
It's at this point that it felt like Jessica was on Blake's mind more than finding and saving Lynn. But going even further in that, yes, Lynn is the wife and everything, but I'm given nothing about her. All I really know about Lynn from what I learned in the game is that she's the wife. She was friends with Blake and Jessica at the school. I'm not really sure what I think about this one. I just know something about it doesn't sit right with me. Like, it's like the game is trying to say to me, we care about rescuing her because, well, you're her husband and you wouldn't want to leave your wife in a situation like this. I don't know what to think, game. I don't know anything about her or Blake or fuck. For that matter, I don't know a damn thing about any of these characters now that I think about it. I know... Well, fuck it. I guess we're talking about characters now. Alright, I decided to split this section in half. The entire thing came out to being 45 minutes long, so I will stop this half here and see you all in part 3.